Chapter 6. Check. The pain in Dr. Halstead's shoulder from Ganan's spearing shot through him like a red-hot fire poker, pressed slow and relentless through tender skin. Panicking nerves were scrambled, sending all the terrible news about his injury to his brainstem in bright bursts of screaming electricity, telling him he was dying, that something must be done, that all hope was past, that the boat was going under and all hands would be lost, that the house was on fire and the baby was still in her crib, that the overturned lorry was dripping gas from its tank, and even the slightest spark would be enough to set the family on fire. Halstead tried to triage the lunatic thoughts, as he had when looking at the overwhelming masses of horribly wounded men pouring into his aid station. He soothed his panic in those moments with a simple mantra. He earned this damnation. Each man he saved might save him and expunge his sins. Sieve through the chaos methodically. Discard what is no longer of potential use. This is all only information. The femoral artery of the boy spraying blood. Information. The man holding his intestines in with what was left of his forearm stump. Information. Tourniquet the forearm. Abandon the femoral bleeder. Check. Inspect the loosed intestines. Check. Dirty and perforated by shrapnel. Check. Bound towards sepsis. Check. Nothing to be done. Check. Walk on to the next. Check. And so on. Thus Halstead triaged himself. Puncture wound. Check. Upper posterior torso. Check. Plenty of blood on the outflow. Check. Collarbone fractured upon the violating instrument's exit. Check. No major artery slit, no blood pumping out to the rhythm of his thready heartbeat. Check. It hurt to breathe, but he could suck in a full breath with no gurgling on the exhale, so his upper lung had not been nicked when the bayonet speared him. Check. He could confirm that he was not yet dying, regardless of what his chicken-livered nerves were telling him in wails and moans. He needed to clean the wound, he knew that for damn certain. It was sure to go septic on him if he did not. Time was of the essence now. If he could not clean it while it was still open and bleeding, he was in for a bad end. Check. Harry Moss / Ganan grabbed Halstead's bound wrists and whipped him over onto his back. The wound screamed. Halstead echoed aloud its silent cry. Shock wore off. It was more painful than the initial strike that brought him down. Pain surged again as Harry Moss took his arms and slit the bayonet through the putty that bound the hands tightly together. A quick slash cut through the knot, and Halstead's hands were briefly free. Harry grabbed Halstead's left hand and cinched a loop over the wrist. He pulled it taut and wound the other end of the cloth around a stake in the ground, yanking in the slack and knotting it off. He seized Halstead's right hand and stretched the arm wide. Halstead shrieked again, briefly blacking out from the pain as the wound tore open. But Ganan, Harry Moss, had no mercy in him. He grabbed the arm again, looped the tremoring wrist, pulled it viciously tight, gave another good yank, then tied it off to a second stake. Halstead came back round, shaking. He found Ganan staking out his legs in the same fashion. When he was spread eagle on the ground, Ganan disappeared from his field of view. He squeezed his eyes closed. There was only the sound of his own breath and the pulsing pain that tried to overwhelm him. Halstead breathed through the pain. He had to get that one clean or things would get ugly fast. Then he nixed it He heard his own voice in his head laughing at him. "Too late for that, mate. Too bloody late for that. Ugly enough as it is. End isn't just nigh, it's right on top of you." Halstead knew he was right. A bad, ugly end had come for him, no matter what he did in terms of cleansing the wound. The end was not here, but it was near. Check. Christ. He greyed out again, slipping through the earth, devoured into memory, his mind spinning, dizzy, nauseous, into his past. Dr. Halstead knew he was not officially an alcoholic, like dear departed Chaplain Davies, certainly not in his self-diagnosis. When he first started drinking too much, it was not out of weakness or addiction, it was a prescription. He absolutely intended to use the alcohol simply as medication, a treatment for his bad deeds, witnessed and committed. He saw it as akin to wall paste, smoothing out the past, so the cracks in his psyche from the experience would not be visible. He believed that if the treatment worked, he could be a respected doctor again and live out his days as a member of the landed gentry. If he could avoid the memories, he could return to society in Perth, free from his debts, with a fresh bank account brimming with Alfred Canning's money on top of it all. The stiff drinks, the liquor's fiery burn, they were meant to act as a cleaning solvent. He may not have categorically done the wicked deeds, but he stood there silent, witness to them. He prayed that the booze would burn away the shame, blur away the memory to clean erasure, so he could go on. Nothing was that simple, though. Despite his steady efforts to sterilize his crimes with high-test alcohol, like some penitent scourging his own back with a barbed whip, Dr. Halstead's reformation and return to civilization never reached that stage. Initially, he did find himself comforted by the bottle. It muddied the landscape of the past enough to make it vague and impressionistic. Fairly quickly, though, the treatment failed, and he found himself living inside the bottle, like some drunk djinn. Once there, the memories rose up Van Gogh-like. The experiences recalled in bright strokes, vivid reds and yellows, deep blacks and blues, entirely post-impressionism memoryscapes. An Australian midwinter August afternoon, he awoke from one of those drunk dreams and realised from the stack of papers on his bedside table that he had accidentally volunteered for service in the army. When he went back and tried to explain to the recruiting sergeant that he had been drinking when he signed up, that he was in fact a doctor, not a soldier, the man had been all too happy to hold him to his signature. Medicos were 100% necessary for the war effort, and it would stead Sergeant Ives well to add a professional lifesaver to his list of inductees, along with his harvest of cannon fodder infantrymen. Halstead's goose was cooked. He limped through training and lucked out of the slaughter-ridden beaches in the Dardanelles campaign and its Gallipoli bloodbath, instead winding up on the Western Front in France. And there he remained. His hypothesis that alcohol might serve as a balm proved itself a fraud. Despite solid efforts, he stayed stuck with the memories of every step that led him to that juncture. Money had been the root of all of it, the abject need of it, that is. And at the time, the money had seemed good. Straight up, cold cash on the barrel. And Halstead needed the cash for goddamn certain. Half of what they offered would clear his debts. He hoped the other half would purchase him a new beginning. All the bloody gambling. It had cost him plenty, and not just in pounds and pennies. Unlike the drinking, the gambling was a true addiction, a seizing compulsion, a juggernaut inside him, unstoppable, bent on his gleeful destruction. Oh, Adele. Lovely Adele. Halstead had been a catch. Cambridge educated. Not just a medical doctor, a surgeon. Returned to Australia. Embarked upon an honourable, respectable, lucrative career. Adele fell deeply in love with him and his prospects, over their year-long courtship, as had he with her. They married in '05 over Christmas, and at the same instant Alexandre Renoir was being overwhelmed by the Ode to Joy in Wintertime Cologne. Dr. Halstead and Miss Adele Broom lawfully wed in Perth's glorious summertime. They bought a well-appointed house at a fair price and settled in for the long haul. Life was everything they had both dreamed. Halstead was not precisely sure what drove him to the gambling. As a student, they taught him that proper diagnosis was always the first concrete step to a cure. Without understanding the affliction, one could not plot recovery. But Halstead could make no self-diagnosis beyond the fact that he absolutely loved it. Of course, losing was unpleasant. But even then, the losing fed the love. The sweetest feeling of all was the pain of near-certain loss, taking a last-second turn and becoming unbridled, ridiculous, unbelievable victory. By the end, the winning was not what brought him back to the table, or the track, or the dog-fighting ring. It was the almost losing. The same thing fed him as a surgeon. What was the pleasure in setting a fractured forearm? Humdrum, no joy to be had there, but a severed, carotid artery pumping out life, a heart attack that dragged the victim utterly down into death, a woman thrown from a streetcar, borne in on a stretcher past repair. These were the moments he lived for. To save the moment already lost, to create hope where there was none to be found. These things brought a thrilling rush of joy and bliss. These were moments of godhood. If you drew this perspective out, Halstead could clearly see that he had structured his entire life for those type of experiences. It was the foundation he built himself upon. He decided he would not change it even though he could. For what would life be without it? A field of drab grey. The idea of a life that felt like one fractured forearm after another for the next 50-odd years made him physically ill. No, he would not correct this defect. This defect was who he secretly aspired to be, and he would live with it for good or ill. In this, he was resolute and certain. That is, until his luck turned on him. Like one of the fighting dogs, he dropped buckets of pound sterling on, turning on its master, burying its teeth deep and ripping. A sudden, long, vicious run of losses left him destitute. Destitute, what a word. Forsaken, abandoned, bankrupt, empty, without the necessary things for life. Not a penny to his name. No wedding ring on his finger. Suffering in the hot hell of Western Australia. He lost everything, his Adele, his quaint home, his medical practice, his reputation. His compulsion to bring the dead back from the brink, he was now forced to turn squarely on himself. That was when an old Cambridge friend came to him with the offer. A trek on the Canning stock route, doctoring the surveyors and drovers while they searched out a pathway for stinking herds of cattle flesh en route to slaughter. The money was truly top dollar. When he joined on as the company doctor, that was all that bloody well mattered. This journey was to be his rebirth. It turned into a cavalcade of hells. When it was all over and done, he realized money is only paper. No amount of paper would buy him out of the bad choices he had made or the horrors he witnessed on the trek that earned it. He did his long, slow swan dive into the alcohol, praying that perhaps there he would find the cure. Instead, he found himself sobering up in the hells of the Western Front, drowning in blood, and it was too late. He was beyond triage, past redemption, incurable.